All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in again to the Switchcast, or should I say for a very special episode of Switch Topics, where we're going to do a little special series of shows every once in a while where we focus on a couple of topics all related to each other, and this time we're going to be diving into the world of eSports in relation to the Nintendo Switch. And in addition to our beloved normal host, we also have an additional host with us, a guest tonight, if you will, to talk all about this. So why don't you say hello, AJ?
Hey, everybody. I'm AJ.
And we're sticking with the initialisms, I guess, here, as everybody wants to keep their anonymity on the show. But
I think it's pretty appropriate.
I just wanted to match.
You just wanted to match, just be part of the team, huh? I thought we would start this episode out just because we haven't really talked about who we are, and especially, who our guest is, and give a little bit of background on where we come from in terms of gaming, what our expertise are, and even like just podcasting sort of background. So the listeners have an idea of who me, JV are, and of course why we might have our guest here to talk with us here. So, JV, do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to forge this trail?
Go ahead and start, Casey. Lead the way here.
Okay, all right. I am not the most competitive of the real competitive gamers are definitely JV and AJ over here. I've been mostly podcasting since way back with the Palette Tribune, and that was our Pokemon podcast from way back in the day, and that got pretty popular, and that's what got me into competitive Pokemon, just as something I dabbled in, even though JV's kind of been my mentor in that field. The closest esport I've ever played is Vainglory, which I got into very seriously for a long time on the iPhone, and that's actually a pretty popular little esport there. But, I mean, I've always been more of a casual kind of player in those regards, which is why I got into portable gaming. And I think that, I don't know, maybe Nintendo getting into this field might pull me more into it, because I've never really cared for the really dark and serious type games. I like strategy. I like games that are a little less Twitch-based. Maybe if they had an Advance Wars competitive scene, I'd be more into that. So that's my background here. What about you, JV?
Okay, so I've pretty much been into competitive gaming for a while now. Even from the early days of Melee grassroots games and early Smash, and even from the Generation 3 Net Battle Pokemon competitive scene. I've been here for a while. I've been very interested in esports for a long time. It's kind of been in my blood. I'm Asian, and I have a bunch of Asian friends that were very into StarCraft esports and then Brood War esports, and as that evolved, my interest continued to grow into new games like Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm. So it's kind of been a big thing for me. I've never really been interested in regular sports, and I've always loved the competitive aspects of the competitive potential of games. So it's just been something I've been really interested in for a long time.
And you and I have both been, and I think this also goes for AJ though, we've all been pretty serious into card games and tabletop in a semi-competitive aspect. I mean, you play in pretty serious tabletop, CCG tournaments pretty often, right?
Yeah, right. So I'm the type of person that has to get into the competitive scene of the things I'm into. So if I get into a card game like Cardfight Vanguard, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, I always have to delve into the competitive scene of it. Netrunner, delve into that. So regardless of the platform, it's just I always dig into that competitive aspect of it.
And AJ, tell us about yourself, and do you have the eye of the tiger when it comes to esports and gaming?
I've been spending a lot of time in esports the last several years. I'm a developer for 7 years now for major console and mobile games. Working for a lot of the big publishers. You've probably played something I've had a hand in. Esports-wise, I kind of grew up on Pokemon, which I'm sure most of the listeners did, and always stayed heavy with that. Also, big into Hearthstone.
Oh, yeah.
Championship for that recently.
Absolutely.
Did you manage to catch any of that? Because that was some good matches.
Okay, so right now my biggest esports obsessions are Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, and Overwatch. So I'm pretty into the Blizzard esports deal right now. I used to be into the League of Legends and Dota side, but now I've really converted to Blizzard.
I've been looking at Overwatch lately. I'm catching some flack at work. I picked it up a couple weeks ago and have yet to install it.
Oh, so yeah.
They're getting on to me for that. I'll have to get around to it eventually.
Considering how new that game is, the fact that it has such fervent esports potential is exciting. And, it's just something that we have to see grow in the future.
Oh, yeah. When you look at a game like Overwatch, it's clear that Blizzard set out to make a massive esports title from the get-go. And if you look at the events they're putting together and partnering with and the prize pools they're going with it, it's clear they're going all in on this one, hoping to get their next kind of StarCraft out of this.
Absolutely. It's kind of catching up to League of Legends in terms of popularity too. So the fact that such a big giant such as League of Legends can be almost matched by the potential of Overwatch is insane. But I don't know if we really have any coverage of Overwatch with the Switch.
Yeah.
Moving into what we really want to dig into this topic, the first thing I kind of wanted to address is, and surprisingly enough, and this is something that totally slipped my mind when we were first thinking about this, when I asked and I reached out to the listeners for questions about this topic, more than one of them asked me, what is an esport? They're not even familiar with how they're organized. Is it just online? Are they in they asked me, are they in a building or like the Wizard movie? What is an esport? And so give us just kind of an overview of how they are organized and what the state of them are today.
These days we've got a lot of different things going on for what is an esport, but the things that are the big esports, they're the ones where you're going to have a world championship, and it's going to be people from all over the globe in a building together on a big screen, a lot of fanfare, there's tickets and events. It's like going to a big baseball game, except you go up and everybody's playing Call of Duty or Pokemon instead.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of online leagues too as qualifiers as well.
Okay, so that's how it leads in. You kind of just play online to start, maybe with organized online tournaments, and then eventually you'll get qualified to go out to Los Angeles to play in the next big tournament.
Right. A lot of games will build in systems like that, or there's some third-party systems, and they'll kind of give players a score and get them together for regional events a few times a year until they've selected the top 8 people or 12 teams or what have you that are going to go and compete on the big stage for massive prize pools.
Right. And it's definitely fascinating because each game has its own different structure based on how the game works. For example, if we had something like Heroes of the Storm, which I'm actually the biggest fan of, you can even have certain teams be dedicated to a game and play on weekly leagues, earning cash from the company essentially as a salary to play games and showcase the games on a weekly basis, and then playing for bigger tournaments and big events throughout the year.
What are some of the biggest ones right now? I mean, you mentioned already, I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with League of Legends. Overwatch is kind of making its appearance there. We have Heroes of the Storm. What are the other big ones that people the big money tournaments?
Call of Duty usually always has a pretty substantial prize pool.
Absolutely.
Counter-Strike is still going pretty strong.
That's been out for decades, right?
It really has. It's surprising.
Yeah, and it's gotten a rejuvenation of viewership relatively recently too. There were recent updates that they made to it that's made it more esports friendly, and it's gotten really popular again. Essentially, if you want to see what the most popular esports games are out right now, just go to twitch.tv's main website and check out their featured games. Those are really the ones that are a top esports material.
Absolutely. And you can go and just see all the live games, and as you watch the list going down, the less viewers it has, the less popular it is for an esport.
Okay. Now think about that with the popularity of different ones. Do they generally cycle in and out, like whatever's popular today will inevitably fade out, or are there just some that are just evergreen titles that will probably be an esport forever? Or is the trend most of them just they're popular, they're good for maybe 5-6 years, and then the next thing takes its place?
I think there's a bit of a mix, but you'll always have like your old salts that'll be there forever. I don't see StarCraft going anywhere. At this point, League of Legends has definitely asserted itself as the go-to MOBA game, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. But you have things like Overwatch and Hearthstone that are relatively new, and we're going to just have to see where those go in the future.
No, I do agree with the fact that evergreen titles are kind of at the top right now. League of Legends, Overwatch, Hearthstone, those are a platform that the companies can add to and iterate to instead of releasing new games like Pokemon Sun and the next version is Pokemon Star, etc. League of Legends, Hearthstone, Dota 2, all of those are just a single game that the developers would add onto so that the platform itself wouldn't really change so drastically.
I mean, I guess in a way, that's kind of similar to how Pokemon works in that Pokemon is always the same essential game, but the new games are just rule updates, more or less. And you transfer your Mon over, and those are basically similar to the character pool that you have, and they each receive their buffs and their nerfs from each generation, and maybe there's some rule tweaks. So I do see some parallels between a game like Pokemon and something like League of Legends in that it's one evolving platform rather than, I mean, you could look at Pokemon as separate games, but it's probably equally viable to look at it as just a single evolving platform.
That's actually a good point. There are parallels there. Every new generation of Pokemon introduces new characters, kind of like in a MOBA. New characters get introduced, and there's new balances and metas based on all the new characters and tweaks. So yeah, I think that's actually a pretty apt comparison.
Now, one of the big questions I kind of want to approach here is, is there any real formula, or is there like an essential element to something becoming an esport rather than just a casual competitive game? Do they have to have like a certain type of like gameplay element or a certain style or one thing, or is pretty much anything really just could be an esport if given enough promotion and good players?
I think a lot of it comes down to making the game with the idea of the esport competitive feel. So you've got to have those big moments driven by skill and like strategy that kind of can push an average player into an exceptional player and maybe save a game that's not quite going so well into a total victory with just a big play. Like if you're playing Call of Duty and your team's down and then you wipe the whole other team and capture a few points, you've just changed the entire game through one player's standout skill. But even if you have a game like that, you've got to have the viewership and you've got to have the backing, or it's never going to take off.
Right. I completely agree with that. There are so many games out there right now that are attempting to grab that esports space, but they don't necessarily have the viewership, the support of the community, and the backing to follow through with that dream. It's really tricky. It's really tricky to consider what the essential element of an esport is, since if you can predict what the next huge esport game is going to be, then every company is going to want to copy that formula, essentially.
It's interesting because like not just the game elements have to be there, but the company that produces it has to push it for that. Like I know a lot of organizations, especially here in New York, that are pushing really big Smash Brothers tournaments. There is a huge Smash Brothers scene, and they have monthly really big events for it, but I can never see it really being an esport because I never feel Nintendo's pushing it for that. That's not their interest with Smash Brothers, so they're never going to kind of christen it as such, even though it could technically. I mean, that's another argument. I have many long debates with people whether Smash could make a competitive game or if it's just random craziness.
I think if you take the items out, Smash can totally be a competitive game driven by skill, but you've got to get Nintendo to want to really get on board and push it as an esports title, and then they're backing to help drive up those large prize pools to get players to put in the time and practice and take this seriously. Mm-hmm. If you can't live off your esport with the amount of time you have to put into it to excel, it's just not viable for people.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's why the newest changes to something like Heroes of the Storm, adapting a more league salary-based format for their competitive teams, is really a huge boon to that game. Since back then, when it didn't really have as set an esports formula, a lot of the teams that were competing in Heroes of the Storm were quitting because they weren't entirely sure about what their future would be in the game. So now that the company is backing it quite a bit more, then there's a lot more esports fervor.
One small detail I think is kind of pretty worth mentioning is the importance of commentators. I know that like Super Evil Megacorp, who made Vainglory, they had a hard time finding good commentators because obviously that's not there for the players. They know what's going on. But for the casual, like the spectator who wants to get in, the commentator is like the person who tells the viewer why that was important, fills them in on the, what's happening and what phase of the game. It kind of educates them because the casual viewer won't know like how important something like a big play might have been. They might have just, so he took out the guy on the left flank. What's that matter? Well, they're the one who tells you, no, that just opened up the whole like floodgates for their victory there. Have you ever, I'm not sure if you've ever experienced anything with like commentators or, finding talent for that.
I've never seen the finding talent side of it, but I've interacted with that talent a lot. I see a lot of them on a pretty much day-to-day basis, and where you get a lot of your commentators is from retired players.
Okay.
When you're in esports, a lot of the Twitch-based games, people are retiring from those at about 27-ish.
Okay.
And then you've still got a life ahead. You've got a family to provide for, maybe some things you got to do. And a lot of them move into commentary or just big fans who can't quite compete at that top level. That's where you get your go-to commentators out of.
Okay. Right. So it takes a little time before you can get access to that.
You definitely need some time.
Yes, exactly. And, commentators aren't even just for beginners. I go back to Heroes of the Storm a lot, but that's the one that I pay attention to.
We all have our focuses. That's right. Fine. Go ahead.
But some of the best or most lauded commentators are those, veterans who have been pros before and are now commentating and giving their insight that not necessarily completely casual players are able to. It's just for casual players, but they're able to give insight that you wouldn't normally see as even just a trying to be competitive person. So if they can provide insight that can help you improve your game as someone who wants to be competitive in the game itself.
I'm going to have to put a link in the show notes, JV, to your commentation of our early Pokemon tournaments we had.
Oh, no, don't do that. That's embarrassing.
That was good stuff, JV. Even back then, I didn't know anything about that, what was going on with the competitive scene, but I loved listening. What was it, you and Rin, was it?
No, it was me and Seth back then.
Okay. And he did the commentary for a whole bunch of our Pokemon tournaments online. It's a really cool little YouTube video with even a couple zoom ins here and there just to dramatic effect, but it was great to hear when I saw the opponent just building up with using Curse to build up his own stats, and it just looked like he was going on the defensive, or when no one knew what that potentially could lead to. But you would say, oh, no. He's possibly got this move in his, in his build. And if he has that, he could probably finish this off in any turn now. And it was just explaining to me what's to expect and to know why, what the tension was really interesting. And it taught me, and it got me more interested in playing it myself, because now I kind of had an idea of, oh, now I understand that strategy. Maybe I'll try using it.
Right, and there's also the element of feeding off of the hype of the commentators. Even if you pretty much know exactly what's going on, why people are doing what, following along with the flow of the commentator really can build up the hype. The commentators can be there to raise the hype levels whenever something exciting is going on, transition you through more of the lull moments so that you would have something to think about while there's not too much action going on, and then rise back up to the hype whenever something explosive goes on. So commentators are very important.
I think that's a common thing among gamers, is you just hear somebody talking about that thing you're passionate about and they're getting excited, and that gets you excited and passionate about it as well, and then you want to talk about it and you spread it around.
Yeah. Right, that's why Twitch channels of people streaming their games are so popular right now. It's because, if you love a game, you kind of want to see the game played when you can't play it yourself, and if they get excited playing the game, it's kind of like you're there sharing that experience with them.
Yeah, no, emotions are definitely contagious. I can't even watch certain shows unless I'm watching, I stopped watching anime when I was the only one watching it, because it was something I could only get into when I was surrounded with other people who got into it or got excited at Gurren Lagann and stuff like that. Without that community to push me into it, I kind of fell out of favor with it.
And that's why I'm so excited for this Nintendo Switch community that we're forming.
Yes.
It's exactly this, everyone's getting excited about this one topic, this one console, and we're able to feed off of each other's excitement for it. And, it's fun. It's what gamers are all about.
All right, let's dive into some specific games, at least the two main ones that look the most promising as future eSports for the Nintendo Switch. Shall we?
Absolutely, let's go.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's start off with the main one, because we just got the announcement. I'm sorry, not the announcement, but there was a leak that, if true, says that there will be the third Pokemon in the current generation, where we have Sun and Moon for 3DS. We'll have Pokemon Stars for the Nintendo Switch. And so that opens up, well, two things. I said that I would be happy if it was just like the Pokemon Stadium to make real fancy battle animations for online play. But this could fulfill that probably, and just link it all together with a Switch version of Pokemon. So let's first talk about what are your opinion? What are just your general takes on Pokemon as an esport? What is its main appeal as an esport to people?
I mean, I think Pokemon's biggest appeal as an esport is that even outside of the esports space, it's about battling. Mm-hmm. It's about competing, and you'll compete with your friends, you compete with the NPCs in the game. You're already striving to do what you do in the esport. And then it's just a bigger field, a bit more tweaks and things you have to get used to people doing, and it grows and grows into something someone is already doing, but can do at a much bigger level and be more excited about.
You see, AJ, she knows what she's talking about. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's a really good point regarding Pokemon as an esport. The fact, one big aspect about Pokemon is that it's huge. It's a cultural phenomenon. Everyone knows about it, and everyone knows that it's about battling. Everyone knows that you want to be the Pokemon master, and how do you do that? You train up your Pokemon, make a team, and beat other people's Pokemon that they've trained. So it's kind of part of the core of Pokemon. This competitive aspect of it.
That's a really fascinating insight, because right, like even if you're just into the cartoons or the manga or something like that, they're all still about the same exact thing that you do when you're playing the game. You are reading about people having the same style of battles and trying to achieve the same kind of tournament level success that you are as a player if you're in that mentality. Like if we had say a StarCraft comic book, it would probably be about a war, or maybe like some special forces trying to like defeat the Hive Queen. I don't know, but it probably wouldn't feel like the same kind of adventure that the player of a StarCraft game was encountering. It wouldn't be about the guy who's choosing where to put his buildings and what units to send out.
Right, exactly. The story of Pokemon is about going around, gathering, badges and competing with people to become the champion in battling. So there's an inherent, feel to it that goes into the esports aspect automatically.
Yeah, you feel competitive throughout all of their products, and that makes you want to compete.
Oh, that's good. Now, what is some of the drawbacks? Is Pokemon already an esport? I mean, they already have the video game championships. They have their own tournaments. Is it already a successful esport?
It's definitely an esport. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a successful one.
Okay.
To draw a parallel between the Pokemon card game and Hearthstone, the Hearthstone World Championship just took home $250,000.
Okay.
Last month. And a bit before, the Pokemon card champion took home $15K.
Okay. Interesting comparison. That's actually...
Yeah.
That's why we have someone like AJ on the show today to tell us those kind of details that I would never know.
You've also got on a lot of those big successful esports, the people they're aiming the sport at are the 18 plus as the majority, who are going to win big prize money and support their life on it. Whereas with Pokemon, all of the prize pool has the option of being money or a scholarship. And then for the under 18 crowd, it's a scholarship or some flight credits or something like that. It's just aiming younger and not getting that real drive that we could have based on the players, because they're not really old enough to be exposed to people in that way.
Right, exactly. Now, I completely agree that there's a certain target audience for Pokemon that's a little skewed younger, so there's not as much competitive drive quite yet. I do know that the Pokemon World Championships are trying to up their prize pools a bit more each year, but it's not nearly as far or as big as League of Legends or Hearthstone right now.
Okay, so it's kind of just running on the support of Nintendo, but it might need a real lift of popularity in that regards, in esport competitiveness, before it can achieve that level of success that we're looking at.
Right. It's not even just that necessarily. Right now, Pokemon as a competitive game, it can be seen as a side game, as something you play on the side, go to a regional, and then go to Worlds if you make it. With big games like Hearthstone, League of Legends, and Overwatch or Counter-Strike, those are games that you can dedicate your life to and become an actual professional gamer for that, because you can get the income on a more consistent basis.
Do you see any steps? What do you feel that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company have been doing to maybe change that? Have you noticed, or do you feel that they're really making a effort towards elevating its status?
I feel like what they need to do is bring in some partners to kind of elevate it and advertise it more, and then aim a bit towards Pokemon's older crowd, because we definitely know it's there. All three of us play Pokemon, and I don't think any of us are in need of a scholarship right now.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Now, what are some of the weaknesses, though? What things hold it back otherwise as a game that might not make it as attractive as an esport?
Well, for me, I think one of the things holding it back is that it's turn-based. So
exactly,
it's not like Hearthstone where you're drawing new cards each time. It's not like one of those digital card games where something new pops up every single time a turn happens. The same Pokemon are out there. It's turn-based. You have to wait for each player to choose their move, and there's a lot of downtime that could happen. So I think maybe that's where its weakness could lie.
Yeah, I think spectating Pokemon can get a little dull because it's essentially chess, but you've got to pick your favorite 6 pieces instead of using the whole board.
Right. Do you think that could be fixed with something? Like, do you think, like, maybe if they just shortened the timer a bit, or if they gave something to happen on screen between moves that was interesting? Do you think anything like that could maybe compensate for that style of gameplay?
Well, they're kind of adding to that now. With Pokemon Sun and Moon, in between each choice, the camera angles are a lot more dynamic. You can see the trainer a bit more, and there's more movement to the Pokemon while they're idle.
I guess that also could tie into the commentator aspect. I mean, just having someone fill in between the turns with analysis saying, oh, he's poisoned, that's going to put him in a big predicament. If he's going to have to do this or take him out now, or, someone to fill in that gap with something interesting to talk about.
Good commentators would definitely help. Someone to kind of be given a breakdown based on their team and the moveset that's selected through it, what they think might be going through the player's head, and try and be a little predictive of it. I think XY kind of showed the idea of this with the little stats they'd throw up during a battle scene.
Yeah.
But they need to get a little more specific in their stat development there, instead of just things that are essentially random or have nothing to do with the battle at all.
Right. I totally agree with you there. Commentators will essentially make or break a game like Pokemon, because it would be on their shoes to break up the little pauses between each action.
You know what it reminds me of?
Yeah.
Baseball.
Exactly.
That's
I mean, baseball's
point,
a game that's it's pretty much the closest thing to a turn-based sport.
It's definitely turn-based.
Yeah, it's a turn-based sport. It's like, okay, here is a turn, here's a pitch and a thing. Okay, now we wait for the next turn to start. New guy stands up, and there's a lot of downtime, and not even that much actions. Like, you have 10 players on the field doing nothing at given time, and then maybe something happens for a few seconds. The commentators fill that entire void with every stat and just talking about anecdotes with the viewer. That's kind of what makes baseball what it is and appeals to some people.
It's also information about the players, using them to kind of drive the sport as personalities.
Okay, yeah.
To just hold people's interest. Like, mega baseball stars, people who are into baseball really know, and the rest of us hear occasionally.
Right.
Like, I know A-Rod is a person. I don't know what he does, but I know it's baseball.
Hey, A-Rod is like the Pikachu of baseball. It's like your mom might see you watching a Pokemon battle, and she has no idea what anything. Oh, there's that Pika Pal guy. I know him.
Right. And, as someone who's already very heavily into the competitive Pokemon scene, watching, esports tournaments of Pokemon going on is exciting to me, because I can already infer what I want from what's happening. But the big reason why maybe Pokemon isn't as popular as an esport as it could be is because of that little gap of not knowing what's going on the screen.
So I collected some feedback again from our followers on the Facebook and Twitter, and I'm just going to read off some of the general feedback we got from the community. Well, a lot of them all favor the video game championship rule set, and I believe JV will agree to that opinion.
Absolutely.
Is that the standard doubles format?
Yeah, that's a standard doubles format.
Right.
VGC.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, that's where it's 2v2. You go in with a team of 6, but you only pick 4 of them to go into the battle after you've seen what your opponent's 6 are. And then the battle is just, until you knock out the entire team or someone runs out of their chess timer, basically.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that adds a lot of strategy and adjustment to what your players are doing, and different little quirks that you can't really do in a singles match. Like, things evolved around hitting your own person to supercharge them.
I completely agree. There's also the fact that there's less Pokemon out, and there's 2 Pokemon out at the same time. That means the games are more compact, and more things are going on at once.
Right.
So it's more exciting to even watch compared to just singles where you're constantly switching back and forth between your team.
Right. And some people might get confused because they see Smogon, which is, a very large online competitive community, but they play by the 1v1 rules. And I think that's where reactions like the next one from My Little Endy, his response was that team builds in Pokemon seem to be rather limited in the hardcore sects, so I feel that it would need to expand more. And I'm assuming he means when he says that it's in relation to 1v1 rules, because I feel that the pool of potential strategies is exponentially grown, and there's a lot of surprise winners in the 2v2 rule set.
Yeah, I think in 1v1 you see a lot of just going for that one-hit KO, and then in 2v2 it gets a little more complicated.
You just basically set up a sweeper in 1v1 and you try to beat up everybody before they can even react.
Right, essentially. And in all honesty, that's not really that exciting to watch. It might be exciting and tactical to play.
Yeah.
And I agree. I do have fun with it sometimes, but it
feels great.
Yeah. As a visual esport though, watching the opponent's Pokemon buff and then switch and then trying to predict switch,
the mind games in TV2 are so interesting too. Just, who should I target this turn? Which one might use protect and which one might go for it? Or there's a lot of potential trickery.
Right, exactly. And there's so many interesting combinations and strategies and interactions that come into play with 2v2 that don't rely on the slow mechanic of constant switching out. So I think ultimately VGC would be the right way to go if they want to expand as an esport.
Yeah, definitely agree.
All right, now here's an interesting one. Pie Guy 5150, he said, add some extra rules to the mix, maybe. Have a Nuzlocke challenge tournament or something along the lines of that. To kind of expound on his idea, I thought of why not have something along the lines of more like a long-term, maybe even like you guys have 12 hours to go and catch everything you need, more almost like a reality show of effect where they would have a certain time limit to catch, to train up everything that they would need, not like level wise, but maybe just like teach them skills that they need. But they have 12 hours or some time limit to prepare a team that they then go into there for. And then that's kind of part of the interest of it, is seeing how they go out and build their team over some time. Kind of like a draft, in sports, people who get into it watch the draft and they want to see who builds what team out of those things. Maybe something along the lines of that.
I don't know if I can see that really adding too much to it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people would still pretty much end up with the same team they wanted to end up with anyway. Mm-hmm. Maybe the IVs and EVs wouldn't be quite where they wanted them to be.
Okay, right.
But they're going to have the mons they want to have.
Right, I do agree with that. And it might be a good streaming event or a fun tournament, but I think as an esport, a hard esport, you would want something more structured and more and less random based on, random stats that you get. You want something more structured and something that you can bring to the table from the get-go. Yeah,
the less random element and the more just raw player skill comes into things, the better it's going to perform.
Right.
What do you guys feel about a Pokeathlon? Like in the Olympics, right? You have the people who go for the javelin throw, and there's people who bring the 50, meter dash. But then they have, the decathlon, and it's not just who's good at one. It's the same person has to do 10 different events, all of them, and whoever does the best in that wins. What about something that was like a Pokeathlon? Like they have a Pokemon battle, but they also have to be good at Pokken Tournament, and I don't know, Pokemon Snap or something else. Like just a chain of games all linked by the fact that they're Pokemon.
All right, let's throw Pokemon Marbles in there too then.
And Pokemon Pogs. So, while that idea is frankly amazing.
That'd be fun to play, but I don't
think it would be viable.
All right.
You should definitely do it with your friends. Get your friends around and all your Pokemon products and just do points like a Mario Kart Grand Prix.
Honestly, that would be an amazing live stream event as a 1 or 2 off, just like, the Nuzlocke Challenge tournament or something.
Yeah.
But
I'd watch it, but no one should get like 20K at the end of that.
Yeah, that's not something you would go pro on, I think.
No.
All right, is there anything else you guys want to hit up on the Pokemon topic before we move on? Before we switch topics?
Well, I guess my final thoughts are that if there is a single game out there right now that Nintendo can capitalize on, it would be Pokemon. It has the recognition, it has, the user base for it. They really just need to, skew it towards a more adult audience, give more consistent prizes throughout the year, and, just improve and focus more on this aspect of the game.
Yeah, JV's definitely spot on with that. Pokemon and Smash are where Nintendo stands the firmest on competitive gaming, and I think that is really where they should put the most of their focus if they want to do first-party esports.
And my last thing to throw in is I mean, JV will agree, we've been following all the changes they've been making to the game for the past few months that they've been teasing out, and they really do feel like whoever's making the decisions right now, they know what they're doing, and they've really made it easier to get into it with the fact that IVs are no longer some weird mysterious thing that you have to grind 1 million babies to get. You can just go and max IVs out once the guy hits level 100. Not that hard to do. Breeding is still important in that you can breed certain moves, but it's not like something you have to do obsessively. The fact that, little things like the super effectiveness of moves, you can just see on your move list. You don't have to memorize every single, type combination that every Pokemon is. They've just really... I
think that's an effect right there that's going to help it as a visual esport as well.
Right, exactly. Because if you can see that bottom screen and see the effectiveness on the screen itself, that'll give a visual cue right from the get-go.
So right. Not all of us have that typing chart memorized.
Right.
It's very hard.
And, just memorizing what every single Pokemon and now their alternate forms, like, oh, is that a dark normal type? Or is that just a fighting type? Like, remembering every darn Pokemon's type combination is a big labor. I mean, it's impressive for someone who does do it for the sake of a tournament, but just being able to get over that so much easier, and all those hurdles to enter the tournaments and enter competitive play, really just, it makes me feel like they want people to get into it. They don't want to be this little cloistered thing that only some of the most hardcore do. It's something that everyone can maybe try out now.
Yeah, and as a really quick note, so some of the typings are insane. Did you know that bug types resist fighting moves?
Yeah.
Did you? Wait, you knew that?
Of course, I'm a bug aficionado. I mean, Ghost is my main, but I love my bugs. Yeah, it makes sense to me because...
I mean, it makes sense, but that's like one of those weird type combination interactions that I didn't remember.
Because like fighting types know the human body that they're fighting, or like, the normal bugs are like freakish body types that doesn't affect the normal... martial arts stylings.
That is a justification.
That totally makes sense. You didn't just make that up.
It totally did.
It's a justification, not necessarily a good one.
Yeah.
All right. So let's switch topics and let's move on to the next game I thought that they've been pushing and people are interested to talk about is Splatoon. So let's go through this. Let's start from the top again. What strengths does Splatoon have in terms of esports appeal?
I think its best esport appeal is that it's definitely a shooter.
Okay.
Which goes over well. And watching it today and in the last few days, it seems similar to Overwatch in a way, but not quite.
Right. I do agree. It's a shooter, so it's familiar. It's, squirting ink, so it's not killing, which is, more acceptable to a wider audience, potentially. And honestly, the biggest advantage that I see Splatoon has as an esports is that it's very easy to keep track of who's winning at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
It's just a beautiful, like a mechanic and aesthetic that you can either just look at the map or you can look at the screen itself and you see, there looks like a noticeable extra amount of red than green on the screen there. I have a pretty good idea who's winning.
Right, exactly. Just as a quick visual cue, you can see who's winning. And that's a big advantage that an esport should have. For example, like Hearthstone, you can automatically see who has more life. So that kind of gives you an idea of who's winning and who's not. With Overwatch, there's a big, points at the top that you can see, and you can see how far the payload has gone. So there's a bar that can kind of determine who's winning and who's losing. And with Heroes of the Storm, you can see the levels of each team, so you would know who's stronger than the other. That's a big aspect of esports that I think is important.
I mean, I think with those examples, you can see a bit, but part of what gives them their intensity is when it swings the other way, like in a turn or 2 turns. Mm-hmm. Like when someone's down 20 life in Hearthstone and they don't look like they're going to make it, and then suddenly their opponent's knocked down to like 1 or 2 life, and they're on the back burner going, I've got to win it on this hand because they've just stolen my lead in a second.
Right, exactly. Now, that's one of the big advantages that Splatoon has as well. Like, you can see that, I guess, the blue side is falling behind and orange controls a huge part of the map. But then, one of the blue team players shoots a huge bomb that turns a gigantic area blue. And you can visually see that in the map itself very quickly. So you would be able to recognize that quick turn. And it's explosive and it looks cool, and it's very quick to reflect on their progress.
And on the same token, the fact, like, by the mere way that you win in the game by laying down your ink and having a greater surface area, you're also opening yourself up a little bit more to certain turnarounds, because as you're winning, you have less area that you can attack, whereas your opponent now has more areas that they can attack from. They can just come at you from a greater option of areas, whereas your opponent might, we have to now go to the opposite side of the map, and there's only a small area left for us to attack. They have to kind of play defensively, but at the same time, now they have to spread out a long area to guard, and there's just a lot more targets for the losing team to attack.
Right, exactly. And that's just something that's inherent to Splatoon's mechanics. So, it's a really huge boon for it.
Plus, it's just, it got those cute characters, and everyone kind of likes the variety of their innocent nature,
It's definitely a nice looking game.
Yeah. So,
and it feels fun.
So what are the weaknesses of this as a sport?
I think its biggest weakness actually right now is viewership. If you watch Twitch for like a week or so and you just look for where Splatoon is in viewership, it's always really close to the bottom.
Really?
The most I've seen, it was around 800, and 700 of those were just watching some cute Asian girl.
Oh boy.
Yep.
So
that's the thing.
So why is that, or what do they have to do to get that viewership up?
I don't think it's entirely on Nintendo here. Like, the game, if you watch it, it feels like a firm foundation for an esport. It's not really been pushed as such, especially not until this trailer. But if people really want to see this as an esport, they need to give attention to those teams that are playing it and pay attention to the content coming out for it.
Right. I completely agree with that. Any game can essentially become an esport if there is a audience for it. And there, unfortunately, isn't that much of an audience for Splatoon right now. Whether that
passionate
changes.
Audience.
Yeah, a passionate
with ad block off.
Care to explain that in case people don't know why that's important?
Or maybe we shouldn't.
The ads are how people are making money on all those things. If people can't make money streaming their content, they're not going to stream the content.
Right.
And if they're not streaming it, no one's watching it. and Nintendo can't see anyone having attention for it as an esport.
Right. And it definitely doesn't help that Nintendo didn't really push this as an esport too much throughout the year. Hopefully, with the trailer coming out, it might be a focus in the future with the Switch.
Yeah, they definitely pushed it as light and casual,
right,
and not competitive.
Yeah, they just had a little bit of, some tournament was going on. They were announcing, some winners, but obviously it's not that level yet. But it does seem like, now since the Switch trailer, that they might have turned things around. They're ready to try to push this as one of their premier Nintendo esports.
Well, I think another thing you need to consider with that trailer is it may be pushing for, hey, we think Splatoon's going to be the next big esport on our console, or just kind of a reach out to third parties to tell them to consider Nintendo as an esport option because they're on board for it.
I gotcha. I see. So we really don't care if Splatoon's the esport that takes off. We just want to open the door for esports in general, and here's our only example that we have to really show for it right now.
Yeah. Like last year, Sony sponsored the Call of Duty World League, which meant every game that was played for the Call of Duty World Championships was on a PlayStation, and with players holding PlayStation controllers in their hand and a PlayStation logo in the middle of the screen.
Ooh,
That's a huge push for them, especially for a game who's historically had more of its competitive focus on the Xbox consoles.
Right, and that was a very big deal because it's perception in that aspect. If you see a lot of the pro players play it on a specific console, you're more likely going to play it there as well. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing in the fighting game community too. There's like Street Fighter 4. There was a lot of players that played on the PS3 instead of the Xbox 360 because most of the pros wanted to play it on the PS3.
Yeah, and when fans see that, it really just sends a message that this is where the competitive scene is, and if you want to be good, this is where you're good.
Right, so that's very important for Nintendo to push.
Yeah.
I kind of want to address, I'm not sure if either of you saw, there was an article in Polygon, I believe it was in October 30th, and it was titled, "Sorry Nintendo, but Splatoon is not a good esport." And I just kind of wanted to go over what he basically listed as the reasons it couldn't succeed as such, and maybe discuss a few of them. We've already kind of touched upon a couple of them, and he doesn't say anything outlandish. I'm not going to say that he's wrong or stupid or anything. I do disagree in general, but I kind of feel that he brings up 3 different games as examples. He brings up League of Legends, Overwatch, and Call of Duty, and he kind of says Splatoon doesn't have any what these games have, but he kind of says that each game has their own unique reason for succeeding, so I don't see why he would count out Splatoon. Like Call of Duty has A and B, Overwatch has B and C, and then League of Legends has C and D, and it's just you're not really making any kind of thesis on what makes a successful game, so it's not really you can count this out. But some of the specifics, he mentioned turning the tide being a big, aspect, and kind of argues that there's not as much ability since there's not a changing strength level in the game. He mentions how in Counter-Strike, you buy weapons, or in League of Legends, you buy your equipment, and the characters change over the course of a game. Do you feel that that's something that's important or necessary?
I mean, I feel it's important in a MOBA-style game, or in a game like Counter-Strike that's kind of built in those MOBA elements to it. Mm-hmm. But you don't need to buy something or have your character change over the course of it to have a big sweep. It's mainly just does the player get the shot off that they need to get, and can they kind of clear the field and take control and then use that time of control while everyone's respawning to really dominate.
Right, yeah, and that's a little bit of a silly criticism because Overwatch, the characters don't progress in that game.
No.
They have set abilities and then they just go for it, and that doesn't change. The big aspect of that esport is that you have to consider positioning and team interactions, etc. And that's something that Splatoon can have. Positioning is a huge part of succeeding in Splatoon, and that's something that would be interesting to see also.
Character uniqueness. Now, that's something that I do kind of agree with is... I mean, there is a nice charm to the Splatoon Inklings, but the fact that the only difference is, I guess, what weapon you choose... and they are nice and distinct. Like when someone has the roller, like they stand out as such. But do you think Splatoon could benefit from maybe having some way to make characters stand out, so maybe like you could tell who's who a little bit more?
I think a locked ability set or a locked weapon set could be kind of interesting, especially because Splatoon's closest like comparison would be Overwatch. Mm-hmm. And that would be something that they could see themselves succeeding in. Or TF2, which also does the exact same kind of thing. Right. But I don't think it's an essential thing that they're missing out. I mean, I don't think those games are inherently better because you see the character and you know their stuff. Because you can look at them and you see what weapon they're using or any abilities and things they have. And you'll get the general idea of what their play style is.
Right.
Beyond that, it's just a model.
Right. And there, if you've played Splatoon, each character's interactions with things can be customized. They have different stats. They can be more defensive, offensive. They can interact with the ink differently based on what their loadout is. So, while I agree that locked character loadouts would be good, it might not. I don't think it would be required to be good. To be a good esport.
I don't think it's what's missing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, and let's just read a couple of the, again, community feedback on this topic. A lot of people mentioned that they want a spectator mode and voice chat for the game.
Yes.
there needs to be some kind of team chat, either in the game or something that the Nintendo Switch does on its own. And spectator modes are fantastic. That's right. What the commentators use. Some big games build special spectator modes for commentators that let them like put cameras around in key parts to like jump through them. And you don't just have the commentators there. There's a whole team you're never even going to see behind the scenes, switching cameras and keeping you in the action and where the focus is. And casters like that really give you a lot more freedom in showing where the action is, as opposed to one character's fixed perspective forward.
Yes, that's exactly right. And it would really behoove Nintendo to put out a voice chat system within the Switch, because that's one of the things that they're behind on when it comes to their online infrastructure. They don't really have those easy online partying systems that Sony and Microsoft have in their consoles. And that's essential to grouping up with a team, Yeah,
you have to have that for the big competitions. Everyone sits on a stage together. They're all wearing noise-canceling headsets. They can only talk to each other through that chat, and you have to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah.
When you guys play competitive games, though, do you use, usually, if the game has an in-game chat, or do you usually just hook up to, like, Discord or Skype?
I will prefer a system chat, so like a PlayStation party or a Skype call, or the Steam has a very poor attempt at a chat system that kind of works.
Yeah, kind of.
For audio.
Yeah, Battle.net, Blizzard recently added in-system voice chat for its Battle.net system. So it's a more universal voice chat system that kind of works like Discord or Skype anyway. Mm-hmm. But you want something that's built in just to make it as convenient as possible to access.
Yeah, ones in game tend to like drop the party or the communication between matches, and that's just something you've got to reset up between. It's easier if you can just have a unified party that you're stuck together with, and you're all chatting in one group that's not going anywhere, and you're not going to get any cut out between match loads.
I can see why they're reluctant. I mean, I do agree it's a necessity. I just know that from the few times I've ever played with people online and Vainglory, if I'm having an off day, the things people say to me make me feel horrible.
People are gonna say bad words.
Yeah,
that's
it's not
what
the
they're gonna
bad
do.
words. It's the ones that dig at who I am. But no, I know that they don't want to have to, deal with that. But it is probably a necessity, like you guys said, for making anything here a serious game. And I do feel like they've been drifting from the super, kid gloves approach. As we mentioned in the last podcast, they literally did not show any children in the trailer for the Switch, and they are focusing on, people ages 20 to 30.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a good move on their part.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was definitely an excellent direction to go, because Nintendo at this point is kind of known as the kiddie console. It's not it's not the hardcore console that Joe Gamer is going to pick up.
Right.
But if they're able to push their marketing and have the tech to back it up towards millennials and people ages 30 and up, it's the way they need to go.
I think that marketing is going to push harder for their partners as well, to bring in people like your Activisions and your Ubisofts and your EA, who target slightly older, and those are what Nintendo really needs to succeed this console generation.
Right, absolutely. That's a really good point to bring up, because this console is going to live and die by its third-party support at this point. Nintendo's never really had that, and if they're able to get the third-party games like Overwatch, like Call of Duty, the actual dedicated gamers for those games might switch over to the Switch, or might even pick up the Switch to play their favorite game on that platform.
It's definitely something they haven't really focused on before, and I think with the Wii U, it was a bit of a system shock for them to see that they needed to do this. I'm actually registered as a Nintendo developer, and there's really nothing for us on third party that makes you want to focus and pursue it with the Wii U. Yeah.
I just wanted to express my sincerest gratitude for you being here, AJ, with your insight with that insight. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really we'll have time to thank her at the end here.
Okay.
So just reading off some more of the community feedback. Eric Ma just said he'd watch it and it's fine as it is. That's
very
fine.
straightforward.
Silverstone.
I don't see them watching it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Silverstone Candier said the idea of a fan vote on stages sounds very interesting, since crowd interaction for esports events seems like something that would be beneficial. I know that they sometimes have that, where if people are competing, the fans, whoever's watching, get to pick where they, battle. Kind of, makes the people feel like they're a little bit more involved in the actual gameplay itself. Could be interesting, or could it be too much of a problem for competitive play?
I see it as a problem.
Yeah, I would see it.
You really want a preset map list.
Mm-hmm.
It lets people know where they need to practice and where they can focus on, and kind of eliminates any unknown factors or maps that aren't quite balanced right.
For example, with Heroes of the Storm, there's about 10 or 11 total battlegrounds or maps that people can play on, and the teams themselves pick and ban which maps they want to play in. So having that external element, like a fan vote, might introduce a random element that doesn't really test the player's skill as well.
Not even that. I think if there's any advantage to be had from something like that, I can totally see teams who would just be like, hey guys, vote for this map that's our favorite during this upcoming tournament, and we'll give you all whatever access, or we'll do some favor for you guys if you all vote for the stages we like on the upcoming tournament.
I mean, they might not even need to offer a favor. Like with global tournaments, people get a bit homegrown and love for their own nation. So if we've got a global tournament taking place in like California and the American team's like, hey, just pick this map every time. You know that map's going to come up pretty much every time.
And
that would just leave bad taste in people's mouths of the whole incident. And the last comment is from Robert Andujar, who said, I'd love to check it out, as to make it more interesting, kind of says what we talked about, maybe limit the weapon selection, like the same character limit in Overwatch, in order to add variety. Kind of what we talked about already too, right?
I can see that. Yeah. He's definitely covered that. And honestly, if they do a Splatoon sequel, they can potentially branch out to having different characters with set loadouts, and they would all have their own personalities, kind of like in Overwatch.
Yeah, that could definitely be a good direction they're moving in. And the trailer really didn't say, is this Splatoon that we know now, or is this a totally new Splatoon?
Yeah. So who knows?
So what genres? Let's move on. Let's start wrapping this all up together here. What genres do you feel are maybe missing from esports in general that maybe Nintendo has a chance to fill in the future?
And I'm not sure what's missing. You definitely have your areas that you see more of than anything else. Like there's dense populations of fighting games and shooting games. There's not very many card games, I say, in a virtual space that are competitive.
I mean, all of them are pretty action-based games, though, right? Like, the only thing I say is, I feel like Pokemon is the only thinking... Like, I mean, I know there's lots of thinking and strategy in all of those games, especially, like, the RTSs. But I feel like, Pokemon, you said, it's like, kind of like chess. It's the only, like, real thought-heavy, your reflexes are almost negligible. It's about the thought. It's about the strategy. And that's the only one I could see pulling that kind of, even having a shot at pulling that kind of a genre off in an esport manner. I can't think of any other genres.
I feel like that's kind of expected, though. Like, when you look at Major League Sports right now, baseball used to be called America's pastime.
Yeah.
And now everyone watches football because it's big jolts of high action.
Right.
Basketball does well because it's all go all the time. Soccer's good internationally for pretty much the same reasons.
And then there's hockey.
People like to watch it go. Oh, yeah. In hockey, you get the benefit of somebody might punch somebody.
Right. Oh, I got to say one thing that esports, at least playing MOBA, like Vainglory has, when I watch hockey games now, because I just got into hockey a couple of years ago, and I watch it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a MOBA to me. It's 5-on-5. There's like the goalies are like the turrets, and they kind of move off in the same kind of patterns, and it's you eliminate, you gank a guy, you check him, you get him out of the road, and then you gang up on the the vein and you go for the goal. It's I don't know, it just spoke to me in a different way after playing something like a MOBA.
If character gets too hard, you hit him and you both spend 2 minutes in the box.
Yeah, exactly. That guy's OP. We got to do a ban.
Take him down.
Yeah, I think. Now, we talked a lot about esports, but we didn't talk as much about Smash, which is probably something the listeners are screaming at us for.
Yeah, if you want to touch about Smash, just, I mean, I guess the big question, though, that we could talk about here is why wasn't it even part of the presentation, or why haven't they really talked about it that much yet?
Well, with Smash, most of the competitive community is grassroots bred.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of local scenes that have been started by enthusiasts of Smash, run by enthusiasts of Smash, and they've kind of latched on to the fighting game community.
You kind of see that a lot in fighting games. They'll have focus more on their particular game without really going across for anything else. Yeah. And they'll focus on games that came out 5 or 10 years ago that really aren't getting any developer focus anymore. So it's just the fans really liking playing these games and kind of keeping them around well past the point that they're mostly considered dead and selling for like $3 at a GameStop in a really gross used copy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of it is grassroots. The pricing is mostly grassroots, from collected pools, and it's Smash's scene is great, and I love it to death. But it's not at this moment. It's not something that's company sponsored quite as well.
No, it's never really gotten the love from Nintendo.
Yeah,
beyond being like, oh, we'll sell this and everyone will buy it and they'll have fun.
Yeah,
but they just don't continue to focus on it after it's there.
My reservation about Smash in competitive, at least as terms of how Nintendo would sponsor it, is that for me, Smash is about that, 4-player chaotic battle with, the items and all that stuff kind of showing up. That's what makes it unique. But when they do it as a competitive game, it's, they have to stabilize, they have to control everything, and they put it on, was it Final Destination map, which is just the one platform, and generally it's the no items and it's one-on-one.
Yeah, they pull out the factors that make it
the randomness,
that interesting party game.
Right. And I know that's, those chaotic factors are what make it less, or at least more random. But I mean, maybe I'm only saying this because I'm not a competitive player in it, but I feel like that in and of itself, it's like playing poker, right? It's the difference between playing chess and poker. Chess, if you're better, you will win 90% more times of the time than your opponent. Whereas in poker, you if you're a better player, will still win only 60% of the time, but it's because he's so much better. He just knows when to raise the stakes. He'll win over the course of 100 games more, and that 10% more win rate is all the world for that. And that's how I see Smash as a competitive sport. Not one that's meant to be like this one game declares it all. It's who rises to the top over the period of all this chaotic and knows how to react to that chaos many times over the course of many games.
I would have to disagree with you.
Yeah, I definitely have to go with JV on that.
I do think that there is validity in Smash, in the competitive scene of Smash. There's a lot of zoning, a lot of abilities. It has the fundamental competitive aspects that other fighting games have that make it competitive. Mm-hmm. So,
so why don't they use those aspects, the chaos aspects, to, in competitive play?
It kind of takes away from that player skill. Like, yeah, I got my main start in competitive games through fighting games, like playing Tekken and SoCal. And when you see Smash played that way, it feels like it belongs and that it's part of that community. And when you kind of add in the different shifting arenas and different Pokeballs filled with unknown things and boxes that are sometimes heals and sometimes explosions, you never know what you're going to get. And what could be a positive thing turns out to be a negative or a nothing, and you've just put a bunch of effort in obtaining that item to come out like worse than
but
you
that's
were.
why I put it to the poker analogy. It's like same thing. You can bet heavily on a hand because you're like, I know that king's coming up the next. I know I'm going for it. I'm putting everything in on this, and then you just get a flop of cards that doesn't help you, and you just put a lot of money, and you lost big on a big gamble.
Well, just
that's
because
still a skill base. There's the chance, but it's when you weigh the chance as the risk and the reward.
But it's not just Smash, that random though. Yeah, because when those cards come up and you don't have anything, you haven't lost that match yet. You can still play your chips and play the other person and come out ahead. Poker's less focus on the cards than the people.
I still say, like, you could grab the exploding Pokeball and you're not out of the game. It's just you've started out at a dead, you weighed the advantage of grabbing a good item at that point, and then it blew up in your face, or maybe it helped you out in the time you needed it.
Well, I guess the most compelling aspects of competitive fighting games is pitting how one player's skill compares to another player's skill. So you want them to be considering zoning and spacing and ability damage and moves that each player is bringing to the table.
I just feel that if you're going for that, there's already fighting games that are all about that, and there's a lot of them that do that aspect better.
Well,
like then you're just doing what every other fighting game does the same, if not a little better.
Well, not necessarily. Smash is very unique in the sense that it's more of a platforming element. There's not very many fighting games with its specific physics, and those physics are, fun to a lot of people. That perspective is fun to a lot of people, but being able to throw in the seriousness and competitiveness of zoning and, the abilities of the other fighting games into that physics is what makes Smash so great and so special as a competitive fighting game. And the fact, people don't really have as much excitement over throwing a ball and it's randomly going to determine whether you win or lose. It's not really something that people look for in a competitive sport.
Let's move on. Let's close this out with a few little things. We have a couple of general listener posts on this subject and a couple of general questions. We'll start off with our old favorite American Gamer, and he wrote into us, do you think Nintendo really needs to get into esports at all? Nintendo for the longest time has been the trendsetter, going above and beyond with new technology like the Wii. Is joining an already established group the right move for Nintendo, or do you think they will once again change up the way esports are done, paving the way for a new kind of entertainment?
I think this is a situation where Nintendo kind of needs to get back in the flow of the standard developments. They took a big step out with the Wii, and then the Wii U kind of fell flat as they tried to continue that step. And this has left Nintendo as a company in not a very good position. So they really need to reach out and do things in a more standard way to get the third parties to consider, if not focusing on their console and giving them good exclusives, to at least include it to maybe appeal to people who love a new game that's came out from their favorite publisher, but will want to take that everywhere. And I think esports is another place where they can kind of step in line and maybe give the money to that publisher to get some exclusivity for content or competitions, so people see the Wii and they see this game and they fall in love with that, and then they want to get it, and then they've already got the console, they'll want to buy more games on that console.
Right, that is exactly right. I think if for trend setting and changing the way esports are done, I think the Switch has the advantage of giving people a platform that they can take on the go. This could be the console where you're playing your esport, but you can bring it with you and practice wherever you go. So you'll never be missing the chance to practice that esport or that professional game that you're trying to play. That's something that Nintendo can take advantage of. But they do need to fall in line because esports is the trend. It's the way the future is going right now.
I think another thing with Nintendo as like a revolutionary from a game developer perspective, they've really just kind of had that focus be on their products and what they've come up with ideas to do for it. And you're left a bit in the cold of, how do I develop for these nunchucks? What do I do with this other piece? How can I fit my ideas that work solidly on a controller into this different form?
Right, exactly. It's a good point. One of the biggest, critiques of the Wii and the Wii U is that there's not that much third-party support. It's because their control schemes and their emphasis is on these weird mechanisms that won't fit in games that would fit in other places. So, yeah, that's totally right.
I worked for a while at a company when the Wii U was coming out, and I had a Wii U kit. We were very excited to pursue several options until news came through in all the technical documents that we wouldn't be getting extra game pads. Oh. And that only the one person got that screen. That shot a lot of holes in designs, and there were emails with Nintendo asking, why do we only have one? And their response was basically they couldn't see any reason that you'd need more than one.
Yeah, that's that's definitely not ideal. And
no,
the fact that Nintendo seems to be recognizing that this is kind of a problem for them is promising, I guess, not just to us consumers, but to developers like AJ.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. We got just two more ones here. Peter J. Ortiz, who's been a real trooper and a huge supporter of us on both Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you
Definite
so much.
Shout out to him.
Thank you.
Yes. So with Nintendo seemingly embracing eSports more than ever before, do you think that we could see another Nintendo World Championship down the line? There have only been two, 1990 and 2015. They've hosted Power Fests as well as the whole slew of other events, not to mention sponsoring events like CEO, EVO, and others of that caliber. In addition to the Pokemon VGC events. What do you guys think? Want another Nintendo World Championship?
I love the big events.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
BlizzCon had like 20 different games going on. It's amazing. You go there and there's so much things for everyone, and it becomes more than just that competition, but it's like a convention for those games and those fans. And like, those are great opportunities. I'm going to a couple events like that in the coming year.
Oh, yes, and I would absolutely love that for Nintendo. You know, the Nintendo World Championships in 2015 were some of the most hype Nintendo games I've seen. They were speedruns of Mario games and Splatoon games, and Smash was featured on it. So Nintendo has the capacity to host esports events like this. I think they should do it more in the future. And they don't even necessarily have to focus on one game.
I think they need to look at it beyond just an esports event. Like, that should be there and that should be driving it. But that's an opportunity to basically have a Nintendo convention, sell their products, get out there, have huge attentions, and rile up their fan base, kind of like it is right now, just full of excitement for them and what they're doing.
That's actually
a celebration of all things Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it would also kind of be like a more viable version of what I said before, like the Pokeathlon. That's a Nintendathlon. It's it's not just who's good at one game. It's who can, spread their skills across various things, and a memorable event. That's, the kind of thing that people speak of in fond tones for decades to come.
Yeah.
And if we make it global, we can have a full Olympic style event with different countries' total scores at the end for first, seconds, and third places at all the competitions.
That would be amazing.
And that's how we divvy up, and that will replace war in the distant future.
Wouldn't that be great? I do think that's an excellent idea. Just imagine a BlizzCon, but for Nintendo. I could see that happening. They have enough, IPs for it. They have enough love for their company for it. They should have a big Nintendo convention and host their championships there.
I mean, Minecraft is super old at this point, yet Minecon is still around and kicking every year, bringing in more fans, keeping it riled up. Like, there's a reason Nintendo bought that game for over $2 billion.
Yeah. And honestly, if they do something like BlizzCon for Nintendo, that would be well attended, and they could sell tickets. They could sell tickets for it, and people will go.
As long as they put it in America or Europe.
Yeah.
They need to expand a little more beyond their home base to appeal to their global fan base.
All right, I think that's pretty much time to wrap it up here, guys. Is there anything else you wanted to throw out there before we sign this off? All right, that sounds like a no. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, AJ, for your attendance here. It was really enlightening and really kind of set the mood for what I hope to be a great little sub-series of shows we do. You set the bar high for any future guests that come on here.
Well, hopefully we hear from a lot more guests in the future, too. We'll have to all get together and have our own Pokemon tournament.
Nice.
That would be great. That would really be excellent.
Well, let me just remind our listeners, though, thank you guys all again for listening. If you enjoyed this show and you want to hear us do more, definitely give us a review on iTunes. That helps us get more visibility and spreads the show to more people. And it really means a lot to us just to see us going up on that rankings. Last I checked, we were the number 2 Nintendo Switch podcast. The other one's not really a Nintendo Switch podcast. They just have more downloads than us. But if you keep giving us ratings, we'll topple them and we'll dominate the charts there. You could also join our Facebook group. There's a link to that in the show notes here, and there'll be one if you go to our Twitter page. We have a Twitter account at the Switchcast. We're very busy on all of those social networks, so it's a great way just to talk to other people, and we're going to be hosting a lot of events on there once the Switch comes out, probably our own little tournaments and eSport get-togethers. Definitely doing some Pokemon stuff on there too. I guess other than that, just happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys gorge on our podcast for this extra long little episode here. And until next time, shall we switch it up?
Yes, we shall.
Okay, switch it up.